Hello, welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, JP Wiggins, who's co-founder and vice president of 3G TMS. And today we're going to talk about the benefits of dynamic pool distribution. Now, pool distribution is not new. It's been a topic that many transportation and logistics professionals have been involved with for quite some time. But what I'm finding is that there is increased interest in pool distribution. It is becoming a more important component of the transportation and logistics strategies of many companies. And there's also kind of new and fresh approaches to think about, pool distribution, particularly when you think about it from a technology standpoint with all the innovation that's taking place. So what's driving some of this, increased demand and attention on pool distribution, kind of what's new and different? Well, that's why we have JP here. I mean, he's on the front lines of this every day there at 3G TMS. I've known JP for many, many years. He's got a wealth of knowledge and experience in this area. So JP, great to have you on the program today.
Great, thanks. Welcome. Thanks. Glad to be here. So
great. JP, since you're a first-time guest, I always like to ask, just for the benefit of our audience, to provide a little bit of background and context in terms of your experience and knowledge in this area. Why don't you kind of just share a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics to begin with, and kind of what your role and responsibilities are there at 3G TMS.
Okay, perfect. So I'm a Ohio State grad in transportation and logistics. Actually, I'm dating myself here, but I went and worked as a traffic manager as my first job out of college. It was a service merchandise, so I was a traffic manager there, and we actually hired the Sun Carrier Group, if you remember them, and they were a group of LTL companies that got together, and we were doing some pool distribution with them, but we'll come back to that later. Got into software right after service merchandise, worked at a company called Vocam Systems, and then Mitch West and we started a company called Wesley Software that became Red Prairie, now JDA. After that, did a stint at Descartes Systems for a little bit, and then we started a company called Glog, which we sold to Oracle in 2005, and that's Oracle Transportation Management. Spent about 8 years at SAP on the supply chain side, and then a little more than 4 years ago, we got back together, Mitch and myself and a few others, and we started 3G TMS. 3G TMS, I'm in charge of channels and partners, so biz dev.
Great. Well, gosh, I'm exhausted just listening to, that whole whirlwind experience. And again, a lot of experience, not only on the educational front, obviously, I think you're the exception to a lot of executives that I have on board that, started their career in engineering or manufacturing somewhere else. I think it's becoming more common now to find people that actually have, a supply chain and logistics kind of educational background. So you were among the early pioneers there.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of us then in the 80s, that's for sure. So
great. Well, so let's talk now about the topic at hand. Like I said in my, opening comments, I mean, pool distribution is not, necessarily new, but it is getting, more attention these days from transportation and logistics executives. Are you seeing increased demand for pool distribution capabilities from your clients and prospects, and what's driving this demand?
Yeah, and I guess if you think about it, in the years ago, actually for the past few decades, what did we do in supply chain? We were really focused on optimizing the network. And if you looked up your supply chain into your APO, your advanced planning and optimization, your network locations and where your distribution centers are, everyone was focused on efficiencies and full truckload and full order quantities. And that was the real big challenge that we had over the past couple of decades. Along comes now and, is the Amazon effect or the e-commerce effect that's happening now. And we're seeing order cycles are a lot faster. They're a lot more dynamic, and we're seeing a lot more where your order cycles are faster and they're less quantities, and they're not optimized for what we used to optimize across the supply chain. So you're going to see a lot more smaller shipments is the end result, and that's across a lot of different industries. It's not just a retail thing; it's a manufacturing thing. You're seeing it in oil, gas, a lot of industries where you see this e-commerce effect. And since you got a lot more smaller shipments, you're seeing a lot more LTL. And if you're seeing a lot more LTL and you're moving that LTL between regions, well, that's the solution that pool distribution solves. It solves that if I'm moving regional freight, LTL, less than truckload quantities, or even multiple parcels, that's what pool distribution does, is solve that problem. So yeah, it's starting to make a little bit of a comeback. I mean, we're seeing it, especially in manufacturing and then retail right now.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think you kind of summarized it pretty well. I mean, I think when you look at even things that, let's say, like Walmart or Target, where they're kind of tightening their delivery time windows, right? A lot of those folks are looking to minimize the inventory that they carry on hand. So what that does is it kind of requiring their suppliers, manufacturers and others to your point, make more frequent and smaller deliveries, right?
Yeah, in retail, it's that whole omni-channel. I mean, and the Amazon effect is just driving everything there. If you don't have a single brand strategy and you're not looking at your fulfillment methods, every major shipper in that whole space is. But what we're also seeing is it's not just retail, that whole Amazon effect, that expectation of a delivery model is now, it's not just a B2C thing anymore. It's a B2B function. And you know what, if I'm a consumer and I'm buying on Amazon, but I also happen to be the product manager at some oil and gas company or some manufacturing company, I'm expecting that type of service now of what I'm getting on my consumer side. So it's proliferating itself across the whole supply chain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, can you give some, examples or scenarios where, pool distribution comes into play? In other words, I mean, and you kind of touched upon this a little bit,
Yeah.
but what type of operations would benefit the most from using pool distribution?
It's anybody that's moving LTL freight regionally. Between regions, excuse me. So if you have any volume, let's say it's more than $3-5 million of LTL freight, and you're moving that freight across different regions in North America, then you're a candidate for pool distribution. That's the big one. Customers really, they'll gain the advantage of being able to line haul the freight truckload into a pool point. So you get the cost reductions there related to using line haul, but then you also get an improved service time because it's faster. And that's maybe one of the things that we're seeing is that people are like, you know what, these LTL going through the LTL network, it's just too lengthy. I need to get the freight there faster. And you can also get creative with your modes, like perhaps use a rail dray ray, intermodal move to make your line haul move there to help really reduce your cost more. So it's a affection of reducing your costs and improving performance. So
great.
Cheaper, faster, right?
Cheaper, faster.
Yeah.
That's always that's been the main objective for supply chain and transportation professionals, particularly. And I think you're right. I think it's that time dimension. Obviously, cost is always important, but I think it's the time dimension and even more time definite. It's becoming even more time definite. That's driving some of this as well.
Well, and if you're in a big visibility type of need, you can't track LTL very well. Once you put it into an LTL's carrier network, this is no fault of the LTL carrier, but they can't really track where your freight is. They can tell you if something's gone wrong, but if you're using a line haul, you can track line haul now. You can know where that truck is at full. And if you've got, if you want to know GPS tracking or the EDL tracking that everyone's able to do now, you can put that on your trucks and know where your freight is better. So you get a little benefit. And there's a little minor one, which is reduction of claims. Freight's being handled less. It's not going through the network. So you get a little less reduction in OS&D claims. So just a little minor benefit.
Yeah, great points. I think you touched upon something that I want to get to, a little bit later in terms of some of the benefits and things like that. But let's talk about technology, now, and particularly, transportation management systems. I mean, what capabilities are required, to effectively enable, pool distribution? What's kind of new and different today in the TMS to enable this than it was, let's say, a few years back?
Yeah, good question. This one's near and dear to me. It's in a world it's simpler. If you imagine the way the optimization tools worked in previous lives and decades ago, and some of which I use a lot of, is you needed to be a software engineer or almost a logistics engineer to actually set up and manage and tunes. The systems were great. They're doing a lot of hard math that's happening in optimizations, but the modern systems that we've been able to come out with very recently, they're designed for a standard route planner to be able to set up, use, and manage. So we've taken the hard math out of it and let the computer do the hard math and then let the user focus on routing freight, managing freight. So let the computer figure out what it should be. Let the computer do the dynamic mode optimization and all that and just make it simple. So that's the biggest, in a sense, is being able to just quickly set something up. So like in a modern system now, I can go define a pool point. If there's LTL rates that exist there, it'll just start using them. If there's services for those carriers, we'll just start using them. It's a build function. We're able to build on everything that we've built before, so that nowadays a person can set up a pool point, literally in just a matter of a few minutes in a modern system, and then not have to, and then just start using it. Right,
and I know one of the things that we've talked about in the past is kind of this difference, or maybe you can help define it, kind of the static approach, let's say, versus a more dynamic approach to pool distribution. Can you kind of differentiate the two and what are the pros and cons or the benefits of a dynamic approach?
Yeah, so dynamic would be, let's say that I have a pool location in Houston and I have a pool location in Dallas, and they overlap and they all can deliver that area of the South and entire Texas, maybe even back to Oklahoma, and I'm shipping out of Milwaukee, for example. So on any given day, based on my volume of freight and where the freight's going, it may be better to go to Houston, or it may be better to go to Dallas and drop my freight. I may also want to drop freight in transit along the way. And so that's what it means by dynamic pull points is you don't have to know which one is going to be best on any day. Let the computer dynamically figure out from a cost efficiency standpoint, what's the better one. And then that's another piece of that simpler that were before, being able to just, I don't care that these points overlap. That was a big problem many optimizations engines had in previous generations, is that it would get confused if you had overlapping service points. Now you just let the computer figure out which one's best. Some days you may actually want to go to Houston and Dallas, and that'll happen, and people look at you and go, well, that's crazy. But then you look at the results and the math and the cost savings, and people say, well, yeah, maybe it makes sense that I'm going to go to Houston and Dallas today. So
Now, has this been facilitated by enhancements in, the algorithms that we use today, as well as cloud computing? The fact that, we've got more computing power today to kind of do this in more real time?
Yeah, a little bit of both. Everything is a build. Like, we're able to electronically tender to the carriers now. We're electronically locate freight now. We're able to electronically know the service standards for an LTL carrier. We're able to know their terminal locations. And so all of that is like a build effect. And actually all of that's new from when earlier generations of TMSs were created. I mean, you didn't really have that before. You've been able to build it and add it in, but now we're able to use it in our optimization so that I can use service standards and rates and building. And then, cloud computing is nice because I don't have to run anything on my local PC, or I have to download the client server. In fact, that's how a lot of them still run, is I'll have it up in my cloud and I download it and I run my processing on my server. Now, nowadays we just, we offload all that work to the cloud, so everything's just done within a browser. So it just makes it simpler. And then I'm not transferring data all over the place. I'm just running in one platform in one location.
Right. Now, you touched upon this a little bit right now, but you also recently wrote a blog post, a guest commentary for Talking Logistics, where you wrote about the importance of super users in achieving, the maximum benefits in a TMS. What role do super users play, including, route planners, in, implementing and, implementing pool distribution and achieving the maximum benefits there?
It's like, if you want to talk the autonomous truckload now, we're not eliminating a driver, but making an autonomous vehicle means you're making it safer for the driver. Now, and that's the same with like TMS. We're not eliminating the route planner. I kind of think of the TMS as the race car, but we still need a driver. A faster race car, a better race car, and it's going to be better and it's going to help you win more races, but you still need a driver. You can't eliminate the needs and the use of the driver. And the same in transportation planning today, is that there's still so many things that dynamically happen in an environment that are, let's call it cardinal or tribal knowledge. Things like, if I'm a manufacturer and my customers are placing orders, I may know that there's going to be future orders in 2 or 3 hours. So let me hold on to this freight for a few days, but yet I have to release other freight to the warehouse to get them to pick and ship. So there's a lot of interaction that needs to happen from the route planner's perspective. Our job in the TMS is, let's do the hard math. Let the computer do the hard math of the service, the cost, the which carrier should I be using? How much carrier capacity does everybody have? Let's do that, and let's present it in a nice, simple format so that the route planner can make those intelligent decisions. So it augments the route planning function. And you're talking tens of millions of dollars at many companies. So you're talking, this is a lot. This is still something that you want to pay attention to. So, eliminating the route planner, you can eliminate the route planner if all you're doing is just consolidation or just picking a mode. But if you're doing true optimization, you want a good route planner. And, your best route planners, they just find ways to make systems sync.
Right. No, I love that phrase. And I think you're right. I think what it does, from my perspective, when I talk to companies and some of these power users, is it enables them to focus on the thing that's going to leverage their intelligence and their know-how the best, versus taking up their time doing kind of the mundane administrative or things
that computer do that. Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about, you've kind of hinted along the way here, some of the benefits of pool, distribution. Can you kind of detail a little bit about, what are perhaps some of the buckets of benefits and value that companies see? And, maybe can you share a customer example of how this has been put in action?
Yeah, sure. So both from a 3PL and a shipper perspective. So if you're a 3PL, one of the big things happens is here's a new offering in your kit bag that your sales is going to be able to go out and sell. And there's still a lot of shippers out there that just they love to use their 3PLs. They don't want to invest in a TMS, and this is exactly perfect for them. So if you want to put something else as another offering in your bag, well, this is what it does. NFI, I went to a presentation NFI did at TMW's show last year, and they're using our optimization engines, and they've done this to their sales force. So guys, NFI out of New Jersey, so they've added optimization in their kit bag, and it's an offering that you can come to them. They'll help you set up the pool points. They'll help you manage the freight, and they'll do as much of the managed transportation service as you need, or as little. It's a classic 3PL role there too. So that's one. From a shipper's perspective, I always like to talk about Bemis because everyone knows Bemis. Everyone uses Bemis products, toilet products and bathroom products, and they're American manufacturer based in Milwaukee, and they manufacture plastic molded pieces and a lot of other bathroom products, and it's shipped pretty much wherever you're going to find Bemis, anywhere in North America. And they extensively use pool distribution on a daily basis. And it's those types of examples. Like, did Target order enough today? Target is now, their order quantities are changing and much more rapid. The same with they sell to Walmart and Home Depots and Lowe's and wherever else you're going to find these products. And so you got these constant orders are coming in, and customers are changing orders, and they have to manage what's manufacturing, what inventory is on stock, and they have to keep the warehouse full, shipping freight out. But they ship a ton. Most of their freight is LTL-ish because it's a very light plastic product, and it's almost a good 50-60% of their freight now is from pool. Generally, it's tough to say how much people saving pool. It's very much, it depends. But rough gut numbers tell me that you're able to ship about 20% faster. So on average, you can, you'll knock a day or two off of a move. The longer the move, the more days you can drop off. And it's about 20% cheaper, off your LTL bill. So, there is some significant cost savings. And then if you throw in the full optimization, you might even be able to see a little more of that, where you're managing multi-stop routes, choosing the best carriers based on capacity. And then you combine it with, which carriers are picking up which loads, which capacity carriers have. And even if you want to throw in some light brokerage and spot quote stuff in there, you can do it all at the same. So that's how you get into that total optimization of route planning thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think obviously, there's those transportation specific metrics and savings buckets and value proposition. Mm-hmm. But I think if you go back to, you talked about, let's say the example of serving, Target, and you talked about we talked about, the Amazon effect, and a big part of the Amazon effect is to be customer centric. Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think, it might be one of those soft things that might be difficult to measure, but I think that, if you're able to meet the needs of your customers' requirements, and they're changing all the time, you're going to be a preferred supplier. You're going to be perhaps gain more market share or more shelf space, whatever the case might be, because you're consistently meeting their cost and service requirements as it's becoming even more and more challenging, to meet.
Or if you're the fulfillment provider on the other side, it's doing the same thing, being that hyper specialized fulfillment provider to maintain that need for that person. So, it's an exciting world right now. It's a very dynamic. It's constantly changing, but it's quite fun.
Right. Well, it's what keeps it all exciting here. JP, we're running short on time here, so I'm just going to go right to my last question. As a way to wrap up, what questions should companies, shippers ask themselves to, assess whether they should implement, pool distribution within their transportation operations, or to assess if, the way they're doing it now is as effective as possible?
Mm-hmm. For one, it's that volume of LTL freight. There's a metric there. Anything over a couple of $1 million of freight, it's worth at least having a conversation with somebody. If you're shipping more than $5 million freight, for sure, you really should be looking at pool distribution. There really is no downside to not. If you're shipping a decent amount of freight and you want to start using intermodes, like intermodes for your line haul, and you want to figure out other ways, that's another big piece there for pool distribution itself, is trying to really, do I need to bring in optimization itself? Do I have the flexibility? If you're reinventing your distribution network is another piece too. So if you're looking at where you should locate your distribution facilities, a lot of times you might be able to eliminate some distribution facilities, but still maintain the same level of services by spending more on your transportation leg. So if you're doing a distribution network optimization, sometimes, hey, look at using pool as another alternative there. It's just something to put in your kit bag. It's not a one size fits all. It's also, and it's not for everybody too. But if you're, we always said, hey, everyone always looked at zone skipping for LTL freight. This is zone skipping for LTL freight is what this is. And It's just a way to move forward. And it's another mode that, can be considered for many.
Great, great. Well, JP, as I always say at the end of all our episodes, we always just manage to scratch the surface on these topics. But I think you provide some great insight and advice for companies with regards to, again, this topic, pool distribution, that is becoming a more important part of the transportation operations of many companies out there. So again, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Happy to be here.
Great. And I want to thank those of you that joined us today. If you are watching this episode on demand via the 3G TMS website or Talking Logistics, and you've got a question for JP, you can post it there, and I'm sure that he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.